for the kids. You know the people I'm talking about. Other people need to do more, because just a few more people doing things could make so much more of a difference. Because we're going to win or we're going to lose on what is done locally in places like this. Now, there I'm talking partly about leafleting and paper selling and knocking on doors on election and standing as candidates. And more important than that, when you decide you're going to stand as a candidate in 2 years' time, acting as if you've already won now and taking responsibility for your street, your neighbours, your ward, your community, and actually doing things to help now, so that when you're there in 2 years' time saying, vote for me, vote for me. You know why they don't vote for you, the people out there? It's not because of the silly smears. They don't vote for us because they think we're politicians. And they think all politicians are corrupt, they're all in it for themselves, no one gives a toss about us, you only come to us when it's election time, sod off, slam the door in your face. That's why most people don't vote for us, because they think we're like the others. And you can't cure that with the best campaign in the world in the last 4 weeks of the campaign, just before the election, because that actually reinforces it. Oh, all this slick stuff, where have you been the last 2 years, while this estate's been going down the tubes? The only way to deal with that is to be around there now, next week, next month. So, look at what's going wrong here. That local councillor is useless, isn't he? But don't worry, we've got a councillor here, and although he's not your ward, Russ will sort it out for you. Sort it out, get pictures of it, petition. It's 20 houses about one street light on a corner. One piece of vandalism, something going wrong, something not right. 20 houses, petition just for that. Get it to the council, get it in the local paper. Especially if, at present, you're not known as a BNP member. You become a community leader, because we're in a nation where most people sit and watch what goes on. They're addicted to the television. They sit and they watch other people do things. Virtual world. You do little things in the real world and let the local gossip factory and the local papers say what you're doing, and you become a community leader, because nobody else is leading at all. 2 years' time, you stand for us, for the British National Party. Any Labour ward in this, any borough in the Black Country, any Labour ward, where it's Labour because it's our people, working people, we can win. There's certain wards, as you know, where they're not white working class Labour wards anymore. You know, we're not even going to go there, and they'll probably become the Kashmiri Party in a couple of years' time anyway. That's not our problem. We're not interested. But any white working class Labour ward we can take in 2 years' time in the whole of the Black Country, as long as the work starts in it over the next couple of months, with a candidate who's not a rocket scientist, not a movie star in looks terms, but just a good, honest person who does the job, takes advice from Russ, and just gets on with it, and we can win. So that's the key thing there. But there is more to it than that, because the era we've just entered is so radically disastrous, because the economy, we're not going to come to power for years, you know that. The economy is going to be spiralling downwards into worse and worse financial chaos over the next few months, and we'll sit and we'll watch as basically spectators, because we've got no savings anyway, it doesn't really matter to us. But as has already been said this evening, that's already spilling out into the real world, with 300 loads a day from one lorry place going down to 1 or 2 or 3. It's already spilling out. And the financial crisis is going to become a crisis of the real economy, a crisis for real people and their families. Now, I don't know if it's going to get to the 1930s stage, so there's kids in the Black Country going to school with no shoes on their feet. Probably not, because shoes from China will become even cheaper, because the Chinese will be desperate for a little bit of our money. So probably not. But there's other forms of poverty. And having thousands of old age pensioners die in winter because they can't heat their homes is a worse form of poverty, actually, than kids going to school with holes in their shoes. What are we going to do about that? What can we do? We can't make the government do anything. No, we can't. But no pensioner has to die in your street, because you know who they are, and you can go and see them, and you can make sure they're warm enough, and you can bring them round your house, and you can have a whip round the street just to collect 50 pence from each house, so they can feed the meter over the next week and not have to make the choice between freezing and starving. Everybody can do that. You don't have to be articulate. You don't have to know a thing about BNP policy. You don't have to know anything except that it's wrong for one of the people who brought this country through the last World War to die because they can't afford 50 pence to heat their meter. And all you've got to do is do something about it. Another impact of this financial disaster that's going to turn into a real disaster for real people from now onwards is that people are going to be very scared. Even the ones who haven't lost their jobs, they're going to see it's happened to everybody else. They're going to see, if they're in a middle-class area, house after house after house with for sale repossessed on it. Or if they're in a working-class area, they're going to see what happens when the council completely runs out of money, for our estates anyway. And they're going to see the place going downhill, and they're going to be fearful, and they're going to be lonely. And what do? They're going to sit in front of the television, because there's nothing else to do, sucking up the lies and the poison and the propaganda of the old system. Shouldn't be like that. The people in the 30s were richer spiritually, richer inside, richer as a community than what we've got now, because they had a community. They could, even in rough areas, in the roughest parts of the Midlands, they didn't have to lock their doors with bolts and bars in the 1930s. Even when people were desperately poor, they wouldn't consider stealing from their neighbours. Now they would. So people don't have friends anymore. People increasingly are isolated, drawing in just themselves, the family, and then themselves, just me, me, me. And we're not the me party. We're the us party. Every other ethnic group in this country has groups that think in terms of us. You know, the Black Police Officers Association, the Asian Lawyers Association, the Bangladeshi Women's Federation, the Muslim this, the Muslim that. There's thousands of them, generally paid for with our money, our taxpayers' money. There's not an organisation in this country even allowed to think in terms of being us, for our people. Doesn't mean we're hostile to the others. It just means they've got groups to look after them, we need a group to look after us. And that is what the British National Party is, not just politically. And this is going to be the point when that can come out very rapidly. Because where, for instance, you've got people in a street, in an area, who are isolated, lonely, scared, can't afford things, can't even really afford a decent meal. In the case of many of the younger ones, don't know how to cook a decent meal with cheap, wholesome ingredients, because they haven't taught that in schools to girls for decades now. What are they going to do? They're going to feel even more lonely and isolated and vulnerable. How good would it be if a group of the ladies and the fellas from here, because men can generally cook far better than the ladies if they set their mind to it, in my opinion anyway, girls. Whoa, that's lost the ladies' vote. How good would it be if ladies and chaps, we get together in an area and say, right, in the community centre or in someone's house or whatever, everyone in the street is invited to a pot meal, a big one-pot meal, next Thursday or next Tuesday night. There's nothing else on. You know, come along, bring a can of beer. It's going to cost you a quid a piece or whatever, and there's a huge big bowl of proper old-fashioned stew. Or peas and bacon, you know, whatever it is. And people would find then that, and you might to start with only get 3 or 4 people coming on top of us, but I bet you this, that in a place and in a time where people are lonely, where no one belongs anymore, where all the traditions, everything that used to make this country feel like home has been destroyed, deliberately destroyed by the ruling elite, that any remote harking back to a time where there was a community, where there were local dishes, where people looked after their neighbours, when you could sit around and have a chat and a laugh and forget your troubles just for a couple of hours, but not least because everyone else has got the same troubles, that will take off like wildfire if you do that. And that's just one little example of the things we can do to switch from being a political party trying in the end to get votes on the back of a crisis to being a movement of the people which are actually showing people how to find their way through the crisis to something better. Because at the other end of this crisis, there is not a return to instant material prosperity, because it ain't there anymore, because the energy's not there anymore. At the other end of this crisis, the long term, you've simply got a country where you can feel at home, where the things you make and the things you buy last and don't use up the world's resources as they do so, and where a job you do honestly and decently this year will be there next year and the year after that and the year after that and so on. And that's all we're promising anybody. Anyone who promises you more than that, anyone who says we just get through this bit